Welcome to Behind the Curtain, where we discuss everything from aliens and conspiracies to ancient history and religions, all from a biblical perspective.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Behind the Curtain. This is episode 2. What you're going to hear today is part 1 of a discussion that Josh and I had recently about supernatural beings in the New Testament and in the Old Testament. Mostly the Old Testament though. Because we want to talk about how we lose some of the context when we read it in modern day English because of our modern language and culture. And it's a lot of fun. We're not going to go in depth at this time on this topic. We're covering it very broadly and we're covering a lot very quickly. And next week we'll talk a little more specifically about some of the beings that are named in these passages that we're going to discuss. So we will post some follow-up content, some resources you guys can look at on your own time on our Instagram page. So make sure you're following us at behindthecurtainpc, and I hope you guys enjoy. Well, are you ready to get started?
Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, you got to clap for
2, 1
for syncing. Well, yeah, episode number 2.
We've made it this far, Ryan.
Yeah,
We haven't been canceled yet.
if everyone's still with us from the first episode, we appreciate your patience.
If you love the episode, you're going to hate this one.
Oh man, I've been thinking about impractical practical scale. I figured it'd be easier to do 1 to 5 than 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And I feel like the first couple episodes, the topics we have picked are going to be like very practical unless you disagree with us, and then it's going to be very
Sure.
impractical. There's no way to say, because we're doing some like grammar things today.
Sure.
We're not doing like
Well, that's okay.
conspiracy
It's
stuff.
okay to disagree, right, Ryan? That's okay.
Yeah, you and I are going to disagree a lot today. No, I'm just
I hate you.
yeah, this sucks.
This podcast is over. No,
All
but
right.
yeah, the talking points that we have for today are really fun and really informational and insightful,
Yeah.
and really helped, I think, change a lot of our perspective on theology and the Bible and the whole like meaning of life. Really,
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty monumental.
The problem that we face, we mentioned it a lot in the previous episode, but when you read the Bible as a modern day American or a modern day English speaker, you lose a lot of the nuance of the Hebrew language and the Greek language. And so yeah, today we're doing some nitty gritty kind of grammar and defining terms and stuff. I felt like you hear kids these days when they talk about when they're dating and they say, we got to define the relationship. We got to have a DTR. And so I feel like that's what we're doing today. We're like, hey, this is the space we're going to work in. We're going to define some terms today.
Yeah, that's so important.
So,
like words actually mean things, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Not today.
They like mean stuff when you say them.
Not nowadays. Words can be whatever you want them to be.
And I think it's this whole idea of like, kind of like, I think we mentioned it last episode, but just like putting yourself in the shoes of the person writing what we're reading, you know? Dr. Heiser, of course, we're going to name drop him like every single episode, but he has this teaching. You can get it on YouTube for free. It's called Thinking Like an Israelite. And it's just this whole idea of, okay, here's how the people that wrote the Bible, here's the lives they lived. Here's the language they spoke. Here's the culture they had. This is probably what was going through their mind when they thought of this, or they heard that, or saw that. It's so crucial, and I think it's something that the church needs to refresh.
Yeah.
Because we've gotten, like you were saying, like we've gotten so putting yourself in their position.
Yeah.
That's really the only way you can read the Bible.
Well, again, and I said this last week, and I'm not knocking daily reading plans, but I've seen so many devotionals, and it's like, you know, living your best life and like how to find joy, how to find this, how to encourage yourself. That is one of the functions of Scripture.
Right.
Like that's how, think about the Psalms. Think about David. He encouraged himself by praising the Lord and by reciting prayers, and he even complained to God. He got stuff off his chest with God, and God comforted him. So like that is one of the functions of Scriptures, but we don't want it to just be that. We want to know what the author's context was and what the audience's context was, and what can we how can we kind of understand it and apply that now?
Well, I think it's a 1-2 punch. Like you want to throw this punch first before you throw this punch. Or I guess maybe another dumb analogy would be like, put the toothpaste on the toothbrush before you brush your teeth. Like, don't brush your teeth and then put toothpaste on afterward and put your toothbrush
Dude,
away.
I hear what you're saying, but I had a hygienist one time that swears you could brush your teeth without toothpaste.
Without toothpaste?
She was like, yeah, it's all about blood circulation in the gums and breaking up your, and I was like, that's great.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
But yeah, if all you do is
why not add a little bit of minty fresh to it?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, because if you brush your teeth without toothpaste, your teeth may or may not be clean, but they will definitely stink.
I think she's maybe saying you could get by, maybe, if you're in a bind.
She was an interesting person, man. She knew all kinds of trivia, medical facts.
No, there's been times when I didn't have toothpaste and I was like camping or something, and I'd like wish my toothbrush around in like some mouthwash and brush.
Yeah.
Or I'd put mouthwash in and brush.
Same thing. I mean, that's, killing bacteria and
you gotta do what you gotta do,
and that kind of things. Yeah, that's great. But your point is,
chew on some grass and spit it out like a man. There you go.
All right. Neither Josh nor myself are dentists or any of that, so don't take
informed.
Don't take dental advice from us. Brush your teeth twice a day. And
I've actually been to the dentist like once or twice in my entire life.
Okay, that's crazy.
And both times I went, they're like, "You're fine."
Yeah.
I'm like, thanks.
Well, I go like twice a year.
I don't want to be here.
And I hear I'm fine. So, the dentist gets paid a lot to look at my teeth for about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And go, you're good. Get out of my chair.
You're good. Next.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's the life.
So my oldest daughter, Autumn, just had a tooth that she had to get extracted.
Yeah.
Bro. Have you ever seen that?
No.
You ever seen a dentist grab a pair of pliers and yank a tooth out of somebody's head?
Thankfully, I have not.
Well, she was high on the stuff they gave her, so she
she
was in La La Land.
She hasn't seen it either.
She was watching like Peppa Pig or something they had on the TV, and they just yanked her tooth out. Anyway,
yeah, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Bible.
Josh's point with that analogy was that if all you do is brush your teeth with a dry toothbrush, you're only going to get so far.
Hey, candy is sweet, but if that's all you eat, it rots your spiritual teeth out.
Yeah, different analogy, but that's nice. Okay, so context.
Yes, that's important.
So I saw, on our Instagram page, Josh, you posted about the anonymous God.
Isn't that interesting? That was just found by the Archaeological Society of something or others. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll have to pull it up to see. But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
It resembles the story about Paul in Acts.
Very much.
Right?
Yep.
When Paul goes into that town and he's dealing with, these are all intellectuals. These are Greek philosophers and city leaders and stuff. And he's walking around and seeing all these statues and all these idols. And then one says to an unknown God, and he says, hey, this one that you worship, I want to tell you about him because he's the one. And he even quotes Greek philosophers to appeal to the Greek intellect.
Well, this is the Areopagus.
Yeah.
This is like the university, of the day. This is like walking up into LSU with all the like professors sitting around.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't realize when, like, we quote now because it's in the Bible, we say things like, in him we live and move and have our being.
Yeah.
And we're quoting Paul, but Paul is actually quoting a Greek philosopher, I think about Zeus.
Zeus. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's saying, you guys think this about your gods, but let me tell you about...
Exactly. So think about that, Christian. You're quoting a worshiper of Zeus, showing his adoration and his worship to Zeus being his almighty God. And Paul takes that and says, no, that's the wrong God.
Yeah, Paul was we know biblically that he was the apostle to the Gentiles, but like he was really kind of the first not secular apologist. You know what I'm trying to say.
Right.
He was an apologist to the Gentiles. He had to defend the faith, and he would use their own logic and say, like, you guys are on the right track.
Right, yeah.
And it's kind of like how people use, like, movies and stuff. Recently heard about a book about the heroes of Hollywood, comparing them to Christ, and it was talking about, like, Captain America and Iron Man and how they sacrifice and use their powers for good and, all that kind of stuff. But that is essentially what Paul would do. He would say, like, hey, you have heard your own philosophers say, in him we live and move and have our being. And they are correct, but they are speaking of, the Lord without understanding.
You can call that a Pauline apologetic. That's his approach. He's like, okay, I'm going to take something that they understand, that they know, they hold dear. They would have been extremely devoted to philosophy, and that's what the whole discussion in the Areopagus was about. It was all the big topics, the questioning of life and And he rolls up in there and is like, all the stuff you're talking about is great.
Yeah.
It's just going nowhere.
And you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't go in there and say,
if you were to die tonight, where would you spend eternity?
You have a Jesus-shaped hole in your heart.
Which is true, but kind of cliche.
Well, anyway, what I was going to say is that Paul doesn't go in there and start saying, oh, you guys are worshiping false gods. These are made up. You've got all these idols and stuff
definitely.
here.
He affirms them.
He is not intimidated at all by the polytheistic belief. He adapts it to say like, hey, you worship all these gods and you admit that there's this one you don't understand. And he uses that as a placeholder for Yahweh. So that's kind of what we're going to get into today is like when I read that as a Christian, like up until recently, I always thought it was interesting that Paul went in there and didn't even address, not at that point. He does later talk about idols and stuff. But at that point, he doesn't try to say like, take down these idols or anything. He just says like, hey, you misunderstand. How are we to understand that? Like Paul was a Jew. So was he a monotheist? And how did he feel about multiple gods? And how did that affect his understanding of the gospel? And that's kind of what we're going to get into today is that, are we understanding the Christian faith correctly as monotheistic? That's still a relatively new term. I don't think people realize, but like the early church fathers did not describe themselves as monotheists.
Right.
That didn't come until several centuries later.
Yep, came way late. And when we say monotheistic, we mean there is no other gods in the universe other than Yahweh, which I would disagree with.
Yeah.
Now, when I say monotheistic, in my mindset is there are other deities, there are other little g gods, but our God is the true God. He's the one that made all the others.
Yeah.
And the others rebelled.
Yep. So just in case, I don't know who's going to be listening to this, but just to kind of explain, polytheism would be the opposite. Polytheism is the belief or worship of more than one gods, right? Belief in worshiping more than one gods. Right. And then you have kind of like things in between monotheism and polytheism, like henotheism, which is there may be several gods, but we worship this one. Mm-hmm. And that actually kind of describes some of the Greek mentality.
Close. Right, yeah.
Is like you have people like Plato who had this understanding of like territorial gods almost. And he said, hey, in this country or in this city or whatever, we worship like Athens. Athens was named after Athena, and so you have things like that. Some people worshiped Apollo. Some people worship Zeus was like the head god, but everybody kind of had their patron.
Right. Yeah. There was a god for each region.
Yeah.
And I wonder where they got that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul didn't even challenge that. All he did was go in and say, you're misunderstanding the structure here. You're misunderstanding this one God.
Yep. So you're worshiping you're worshiping the bad guys.
So as a Jew, why, how did Paul feel about multiple gods? That's this idea that Plato kind of proposed about territorial gods. You do see that in the Bible. Like, for instance, Paul, again, we'll reference Paul. He said in Ephesians, right, that we battle not against flesh and blood, but against, depending on what translation you read, like if you read the King James, it says against principalities, princes. And I never really understood what a principality was. It is not a being. Right. It is a territory.
Not a person, it's a region,
like a prince rules over a principality. Kind of like, and nowadays, like we have like municipality, like for a city or a town or something, right. So he's saying we battle against principalities and rulers, and he's using that word prince, and it kind of harkens back to like Daniel, the book of Daniel. He has the vision in Daniel 10, where he says the prince of Persia. He said that a man appeared to him and said that he was held back or resisted by the prince of Persia, and that it even says that Michael, the guardian for Israel or the chief over the nation of Israel, came and assisted him. And he mentions Michael. He mentions the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece.
Yeah.
And so there's this concept that like these beings had territories assigned to them, or maybe even that they kind of conquered and stuff, and it sounds kind of like a fantasy novel,
Yeah.
But you do see this in the Bible.
Yeah, the orcs are down in the valley, and the elves are in the forest. And
Or just the whole thing, like, you know, when you think of Greek gods, you think of like, maybe you think of the Disney Hercules, or you think of Clash of the Titans, you know, Hollywood, or even if you read the original material yourself because you're a nerd and you like, you know, ancient literature and stuff, you know, people tend to think of these as fantasies, but this was the world they lived in. They thought this stuff was real.
It was real.
And the Bible even acknowledges it. And so if you go further back, you have statements like Deuteronomy 32.
Yep, I got it pulled up right here, brother.
Go for it, Josh.
So Deuteronomy 32, and really in verse 8, read the whole thing for sure, but in verse 8 is where it gets spicy. It's talking about God here, and it says, when the Most High, which is an interesting title there for God.
Which we'll talk about in a little bit.
So Most High. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, it says that he divided up mankind, and he set the boundaries of the people according to the number of the heavenly assembly. Now, some translations will say according to the number of sons of Israel, and some translations do say that, or not translations, some scrolls will say that, but they found some that are older, and the oldest copies that we have say sons of God.
Yeah, you're talking about like Dead Sea Scroll material, stuff like that.
Yep, fragment materials that they found.
And so if you read, again, it depends on what translation you're reading, but like, for instance, the ESV uses the Dead Sea Scroll material, and then it has in the footnotes, like I guess that would be what, Masoretic. But yeah, the older material says sons of God.
Right, and it's telling me here that it's a Qumran fragment.
Okay,
so these are the fragments that they found in the caves of Qumran.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, study it. It's just fragments of the Bible, written copies of the Bible that they found in this certain cave, and the name of the cave and the region was called Qumran.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So that was like, what, 1942 or something?
It was in the 40s, yeah.
It was right.
It
was like the year before Israel became a nation.
Right.
And so it's pretty interesting that these were discovered right before that. Just throwing that out there.
So they date back the furthest that we have.
You know, we can dedicate a whole episode or several to that topic, but like, you're going to hear people who are critical of the Bible, and you have things like the Dead Sea Scrolls that confirm the accuracy of the preservation of the Bible. There are little grammatical differences and stuff, because as cultures changed and stuff, they would update some of the text.
Yeah.
And
well, just think about like if you and all your friends had to rewrite a novel on your own. Let's say you had to rewrite Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And you and all your friends had to rewrite Moby. That's a huge novel, right?
Yeah.
It's very nuanced.
It's
very intricate. Yeah, it's very old. How do you think it would differ, you know?
Right.
Would you still get the main story right? Yeah, you might have some little different words here and there or punctuation, but that's the idea of those mini copies that we have. Yeah. And just a side note, the Bible is the most accurate and the most evidenced piece of literature that we have in humanity. There's no other work that's been written by human beings that is more evidenced than the Bible. Like Plato and all the philosophers and all their teachings that we have, and it's taught all over, you know, universities and stuff, we have probably triple the amount of evidence for the Bible, like its accuracy and its dependability.
Talking about archaeological discoveries, historical documents,
about
all
3 times as much. Yeah,
it's so, and yeah, we should absolutely down the road do an episode about that, because that stuff is fascinating.
It's very, very cool. Sons of God.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I just found this. Monolatry was the other one that I was thinking of.
Monolatry.
Monolatry is a form of worship that you believe in the existence of many gods. But if I understand it right, it's kind of like you worship one at a time. You don't. So, yeah, these all get kind of blurry. Henotheism and monolatry both say that there's multiple gods, but you only worship one. But the qualifications for that one can change, basically. Like, one god could conquer another god. Like, if, you know, if this country invaded this country, well, now they're going to worship the winning team's god, you know.
Okay,
so that,
gotcha.
So anyway, you have kind of all these views, and Christianity and Judaism are kind of unique because Yahweh, there's no qualities that, like, nobody else has the qualities of Yahweh that can replace him or challenge him.
Right, exactly.
So, so it's not monotheism, technically, if you think that means that there's only one God.
Right.
It's not polytheism because you're not worshiping multiple gods. And it's not either of these other kind of in-between ones, because
he can't be overthrown.
He can't be overthrown. He can't be replaced. We can't change our minds and worship somebody else.
Right. And I think that's where that term, Most High comes in right here, what it says in verse 8 of Deuteronomy 32. So that Hebrew word is Elyon, or El Elyon, which means most high. It's a term of rank.
It is. It's like
uniqueness.
So El is a name for God in the Sumerian and Canaanite literature or culture. And then Elyon, if I understand right, it kind of alludes to like heaven, like the heavens. Mm-hmm. He is the highest God, God of the heavens. And then some people break it down to where like Elyon is like the Lord of heaven and earth.
Right.
That El would be like over all creation, and Elyon would be the high.
It's kind of like how we
parts.
say Michael Jordan is the GOAT.
Yeah.
Like there's no other player. Don't even bring up LeBron James because it's ridiculous.
So here's something that's interesting about that term is I've read, like just doing Google searches on the internet, I've read where historians will say that Jews kind of adopted or appropriated that term and worked it into scripture. They would tell you that Sumerian religion, we're talking about ancient Near East religion now.
Now, why is it important that we're talking about these other religions and stuff during the time?
That is the historical context.
The context, right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So like when Abraham was alive and he left the land of of the Chaldeans, we're talking about the religion that he came out of, the Chaldean or Babylonian religion. Yep. And so when he says things like, okay, this is it. When it
would have informed the way he was thinking and speaking.
When he meets Melchizedek in, I believe that's Genesis 14.
That's a brain explosion right there.
Melchizedek is a crazy character to study. And you think like, oh, it's just a fun story. And that's so many things in the Bible where, like, I learned all these stories. And
I wonder what the daily Bible reading on Bible app is for the Melchizedek verse. It's like, skip this passage, please, and go to the next one.
You learn all these things in Sunday school as a kid, and it's like David and Goliath and Noah's Ark. Oh, cute! Like my 1-year-old son has a Noah's Ark toy, and it's like little animals. And now when I look at it, I'm like, that's actually a very dark story. It's very
oh God, it's horrifying. Yeah.
But
hey, look, kids, everybody dies.
But Genesis 14, where Abraham meets Melchizedek, it says that he is a priest of God Most High, El Elyon. I think that's the first place that term occurs in the Bible.
Yeah, sweet.
And secular historians, try to say, well, Yahweh was a member of the pantheon of El, the Sumerian god, and that Jews, when they started worshiping Yahweh, they appropriated the term El and made Yahweh God Most High, but he's not actually God Most High. And of course, they're secular historians, so they think it's all made up anyway.
Right.
But if you read Genesis 14, when Abraham pays a tithe to Melchizedek, he says, I have pledged myself to Yahweh El Elyon. And so right there, very early you're talking about the patriarch of the Jewish nation.
Yeah.
He puts those two terms together. He says Yahweh is God Most High, and I've pledged my life to him. I've pledged my service to him. So so there is a clear link there, unless you
kind of mirrors
that they edited that or something, like
what kind of mirrors what Paul did.
Yeah.
Taking what they thought and understood about God and gods and all of that stuff, and he's like, no, let me take what you have here, which is it's true, but you're misguided.
Yeah.
Let me put it where it needs to go in the realm of Yahweh.
Hey, well, that was part 1. We're calling this conversation Names and Nuances because it's catchy. And because I think I said the word nuance like a dozen times. Part 2 will come out next week, and in that one we talk a little more specifically about some of the beings named in the Old Testament, like, for instance, the sons of God. Who are they? What are they? If you heard something you liked and you want to reach out to us, or maybe you've got questions you want to ask us, and maybe we can tackle them on the show. Our Instagram handle is at behindthecurtainpc, or you can email us at behindthecurtainpc@gmail.com. And if you email us, just put the word question in the subject line, and maybe we can use that as a topic for a future episode. So we hope to hear from you guys, and check us out next week when part 2 of this conversation drops.